I lived with agony. Yes, with a live-in lover. Agony, my love, offered me more sensation than any Dionysian sadomasochistic fantasy could ever provide.
A gay man in a woman's body.
I cry a lot. Do ceremonies. I grease my face. I lick my...
In short, to have been just like my father, the emulation of whom would have killed me in his eyes. And what if this were not emulation at all, but the very fiber of authenticity? What if I really was and am swashbuckling, loud, domineering, independent, cunning, ruthless, competitive, intransigent, sarcastic, and sexy? And was I not always like that? Except as another?
My name is Rachel Rosenthal.
And my name is Molly Barnes. If you're wondering who that was and what that was, my guest today is Rachel Rosenthal, one of our country's leading artists. She's a performance artist. Through her nonprofit foundation, she teaches classes, and she's also a painter with 2 major shows this month opening in Los Angeles. Women's shows, one at Barnstable Park, which was curated by Dexter Frankel, and 2, Bruria curated one at Bergamot Station, and she's in that too. So without further ado, welcome.
Thank you, Molly.
What was all that we just looked at?
Well, it was several things. Actually, the one with the beard was much earlier. It was in the 70s. And then the others were mainly in the 80s, but also in the 90s. So there were several different time elements.
Now, Rachel, that was you with the hair and the the Betty Boop voice.
Yeah, yeah.
And what happened? Then you pulled off all of the accoutrements that we attach to being a beautiful woman and became what?
I became a gay man in a woman's body.
I was trying to figure that out. Do you still consider yourself that?
Oh, absolutely.
Why?
I don't know. It's just one of those things where I always had a problem with femininity, and I always was a tomboy. I wanted to be a guy, and yet I was never a lesbian. I tried, but I didn't succeed.
And what happened?
Well, I just came to the point where I accepted who I was, even though it was a bit mixed up. And I think that what happened was that I looked at men the way men look at men.
Which is?
Which is with...
Competitive?
No, not at all. I was attracted to guys, but in a male way instead of a female way. It's difficult to explain, but I would treat them the way a man would treat them, a male lover would treat them. And it never worked for me.
I think that we all of us who have been in business or in a professional life, we all tend to think like that. I've retired several times from my gallery, and I found that spending time with women is quite a shock, because women can spend a great deal of time talking about how to fax something, where we all know how to do all of that. And yet the intimacy, the relationship between women is often lost on us because we've been so busy creating careers. When did you first become aware of the women's movement?
Well, I was very male identified for many years, and I was always very unhappy because I had bought into the gospel, which is if you're a woman, you can't be an artist. If you're an artist, you can't be a woman. And it was very painful. It was a very difficult kind of thing to live through because I was both a woman and an artist. And then in '71, here in Los Angeles, there was this marvelous weekend at Cal Arts that was arranged by Judy Chicago and Mimi Shapiro, where women artists that they had discovered in their garages and in their kitchens, etc., all over the nation, came to Cal Arts in Valencia and saw each other's slides of their work for a whole weekend. That's all we did. We sat in the dark and looked at people's art, at women's art. And for me, it was a revelation. I couldn't believe it because I never knew that women were artists. And so that changed my life. And it changed the way I looked at myself, and it changed the way I felt, because I had been very anxious for years and years and years about where I stood in the world. And suddenly, the world opened up for me and accepted who I was, which is a woman and an artist.
Did it get you over some of the loneliness you'd felt, some of the isolation?
I was never lonely and I was never isolated, because during this whole period I was also doing theater, and I had a company and I was teaching, and I always had a lot of people around me because of that since the 50s. And so that wasn't my problem. I could be very anxious in the middle of a lot of people, you see.
Well, you actually got into a workshop, not before your own, but with Miriam Shapiro. It was a discussion group. And you've told me in the past that you felt it was difficult because you were used to running things.
Yeah. Oh, it was horrendous. I would come home to my then husband and I would say, I'm quitting, I can't stand it anymore. You know, another one of these meetings and I'm going to go mad. And yet I stayed.
I like the book that Judy Chicago wrote, Through the Flower, My Emergence as a Woman Artist, because she talked about splitting with Miriam Shapiro after they had done the Woman's Building, one here in Los Angeles, one in Fresno. And then she said in order to get away from her, she had to fight. I mean, they had to have a fight, a violent argument for her to grow up and take over her own life.
Well, I've got to tell you something about Judy. We used to have these meetings where we had to come to some kind of conclusion about what to do next and how to do it. And if people seemed to be going in a direction that Judy didn't like, you know what she did?
Walked out?
No.
Screamed?
No. Cried.
Oh, perfect, perfect.
And then we all ended up, you know, petting her and telling her, don't cry, Judy. We'll do it your way.
I was having a legal problem recently, and somebody said, just cry. Men hate it when we cry.
Exactly.
And
yes.
you can win the argument. You know, I ran into Miriam Shapiro not too long ago at the IGA, a market in East Hampton, Long Island. And I ran up to her and I said, oh, I just saw your work in Las Vegas. Steve Wynn has it as the opening to his museum. And she said, what painting? And I told her, and she said, there should have been 2 paintings. Will you give him a call and find out why I don't have 2 paintings? And I thought that's why she gets ahead, but it's also why everybody gets mad at her. I was trying to pay her a simple compliment, and it did not work. Tell me about your relationship. I remember reading the Calvin Trilling book about Through Off the Wall, and your relationship with Jasper Johns and Rauschenberg and Cy Twombly.
Well, it started with my relationship with Merce and John, Merce Cunningham and John Cage, because they had come to Paris when I was there, and they gave a master class, and we got together, we got friendly. Then we came back to New York, and for some reason, they accepted me into their circle, which was amazing because there were very few women in there. And through them, of course, I met, first of all, Bob, who entered the circle, and then again, Jasper, who everybody called Jap, so I call him Jap also. And I have to tell you that they were both so amazing. Jap was 23 years old and Bob was 25. And they were both so into who they were that I was just so impressed with that because I had no idea who I was. And we decided, Jap and I, to find lodgings in a big loft because I was staying with my parents at the time. He had a very teeny-weeny little apartment, and we needed to work. And so we started looking, and we found a place which was Pearl Street, which is now destroyed, and it's probably Tribeca now. And we found this little building that was going to be torn down, and we weren't allowed to live there, so of course everybody did that. We lived there and pretended we didn't. And we became very close because Jap had the loft under mine, and Bob had a loft around the corner, and we saw each other all the time for about 3 years. And so I was so lucky because I was in the right place at the right time and got to know these people.
You started at the top.
I always did. I had a very good knack for finding the people and somehow, you know, being like a little lapdog around them or something. They accepted me, and I was, you know, I was a witness to that period of their lives. And actually, I just did, not just, but a few months ago, I did a lecture at MoCA for the opening of Bob's Combine show about that period. And I talked about how we lived and what we did and everything. And very few people and very few photographs exist of that period. So I'm sort of the receptacle.
Well, according to the book, you were each in love with the wrong one, and so it became like a comedy of manners in that nobody wanted to go to bed at night because you'd miss out.
Alas, I fell in love with Jap because he was in love with Bob, and he, I think at the time, was trying not to be out. And so at a party given by Shari Deans, who was a Hungarian artist, suddenly Jap made a big play for me. And I knew he was gay, you know, and I thought, what is he doing? But it went segueing into a little more intimacy and me falling in love with him until I had the very bad taste to tell him so. And then he dropped me like a hot potato. And this whole thing was happening at the Delicatessen on 6th Avenue. I mean, it was just a real New York story. So we lived in the same building. He was, you know, on the 4th floor, I was on the 5th. And I was crying all the time because he was with Bob and I was alone with my cats. And Cy Twombly, who had been in love with Bob, was also alone because Bob and Jap were together. And he and I would cry on each other's shoulders, and we would tell each other how unhappy and sad we were. So it was such a mess.
How long did you all live together?
Well, it was about 3 years for me.
And then what brought you out here?
You know, my father died here in Beverly Hills, and he was buried here, and my mother wanted to move here. And one of the reasons was I felt I should be with her, and she wanted to be here because he was buried here. And I felt that if I stayed in New York with all these people around me, I would never find myself because they were so made. They had been made already. They already existed as who they were.
And they were exhibiting with Leo Castelli already?
They were doing everything. And I was still, you know, completely meandering in my labyrinth of not knowing what I wanted to do, who I was, how I was an artist, all those things. And I figured if I don't get away from them, I will never find my voice. And I did get away with, you know, with coming here. I started to teach at Pasadena Playhouse.
Why Pasadena Playhouse? Were you an actress?
Because they offered me a job, Molly.
How perfect.
And then they fired me at the end of the semester because I was a bit much for them.
And then what happened? You started your own performance.
Then, no. I started to teach in a little tiny workshop place that I had rented. And I had all kinds of people. I had Vic Morrow, I had Tony Perkins, I had Tab Hunter, I had, you know, all these aspiring stars. They were young starlets, all of them. And instead of doing the usual scenes, I started to teach them the exercises that I was inventing. And little by little, they started to improvise a theater that as I sat in the dark watching that, I was thinking to myself, this is amazing. I have never seen anything like it. We have to go public. So I said to them, guys, we've got to go public. We're doing something amazing. We've really found something new. They all disappeared, like rats from a sinking ship.
Well, they were really thinking about their own careers, and you wanted to...
They said my agent wouldn't.
Yeah, right. That's always,
know.
yeah, yeah. So what happened? How did you begin the workshops that continued till
of
today?
all the people who left, 3 people remained. One was Lee Mulligan, the painter.
Really? He was taking your classes?
Absolutely. He was fabulous, and he was in love with my kind of theater, and he was making objects to work with and everything. So I had Lee Mulligan, and I had a little dancer girl who had come in from Pasadena Playhouse to follow me, and a boy, a young man from India who was Jewish. And the 4 of us decided, the hell with it, we'll do it, just the 4 of us. And we started to do it, and at the time, my audience was the artists and the poets and the musicians of the Ferris Gallery, because the Ferris here in LA was the only avant-garde place you could go to. And all these people every weekend would come and see my show. And so it was
So it was Billy L. Bankston and Ed Ruscha and Craig Kaufman.
Yeah, all these guys, yeah.
And so they would come and see. I remember coming to one of your shows in the 60s, and we had to stand in the rain. You didn't have a waiting room. And I remember...
You came to my place. You
Yeah.
know, this was amazing because we did perform this theater, which I called instant theater. It was totally improvised and very, very absurd. And we played in dance studios, we played in theaters, we played in garages, we played everywhere. And finally, we played in my home, which was up in the hills. And we were at an angle of the street where there was no parking whatsoever, and people used to park half a mile away and come, you know, all the way down, and then they would have to go up those stairs. And of course, there was no place for them. Sometimes we had, the whole place was so full of people that the people in the stairs would actually stand there and just hear what we were doing and never even saw us. It was amazing.
Now, Rachel, you do these nonprofit intensive, I think you call it, weekends, where you really teach people to get over their fear and get in touch with themselves. What kind of people do you attract, and how do you get them started?
Well, you know, I'm starting one of them, by the way, next weekend. It's called the DBD Experience, Doing by Doing. And that's basically the philosophy, you know. You don't talk about it, you do it.
But I have to know, because I want to come to one, and I want to know what you, what's the biggest fear that people have? Why are people afraid to come?
The fears are multifarious. The fears are, I'm afraid to find out who I am. I'm afraid to show it to other people. I'm afraid that I'm not going to be good enough and do the right thing, and this one will be better than I am. You know, the usual competitive bullshit. So, well, we cut through all this very quickly on the first evening. Somehow, I give them guided meditations, I give them exercises to get into their bodies, I give them improvs where the whole focus is on the art and not on yourself. On the art, and I have a triangle. I say, this side of the triangle is you, this side is the partnership, which is everything else and everybody else on stage, and this is the audience. The audience is definitely a part of the work because the audience puts a cherry on the cake and lets you know by their energy whether it's funny or sad, or whether they want it to be faster or slower, and an audience is very important to the work. And then little by little, people lose their fears of being the critic of themselves. You know, they're just doing by doing.
Look at the screen. Now, these are some of the books you've done in the last number of years. Do books play a big part in your career? Or
Yeah.
are they merely documents?
Yes and no. They're art forms. You know, I've painted, I've done engraving, I've done sculpture, I've done all kinds of visual arts in my life, including these books.
Now, you stopped performing in 2000.
Yeah.
And you still continue to do the workshops, but you began painting. And I think I was one of the first people to see the paintings based on stories, fables from the Bible. How did this come about, and how did you get into these two shows that now are the main talked about things in the art world here in Los Angeles?
Well, you know, about the shows, they came to me. I didn't go to them.
Of course they would, yeah.
And one of them, actually, I'm showing a DVD of my performance work, and the other one is more about the visual stuff and about the painting.
Well, you had, didn't you show in the show that Lynn Kienholz just carried on?
Yeah, the Pompidou in Paris.
And that
Yes.
was one of the first times people had actually seen the work. And then I came to your studio and saw these wonderful Bible fables and also these fabulous paintings of your dogs.
Well, you know, they're my main subject. The Bible stories were just a passing fling.
It's like
But
your
the
dog just
dogs,
woke up. He knows
they
he's
are.
being talked about.
They're always with me. You asked me if I was ever lonely. I'm never lonely because I have animals.
What do the dogs do that satisfies you?
Oh, they're smart, they're funny, they understand everything, they pick up on my moods, they give me what I need, and I love to touch the fur.
And so they're always with you.
Always, as you can see.
And when I used to know you, you traveled always with a rat on your shoulder. Who was that?
Well, that was Taddy Wattles, and that was in the beginning of the 80s, but unfortunately rats don't live long. And that rat died after 2.5 years, and I was just so forlorn after that. But Taddy was an amazing rat because he went everywhere with me, and he became an art rat.
Which means what?
Which means that he was well known in the whole art world of Los Angeles and other places.
People always remember that. When did you first shave your head?
In '81, I did it as part of a piece because I had been, my money had been stolen from me, all of everything I possessed. And I ended up with nothing, not a penny. And I was, you know, very worried about that. And I figured that I would do a piece where somehow I give up, like a sacrifice, a part of myself in order to start over again. And so as part of the piece, I had a young woman shave me. At the time, I had a lot of hair. As a matter of fact, poor Taddy was very upset about that piece because he used to ride behind my hair. I had a lot of hair down to here, and it was his little place, you know, his little nest. And then suddenly I came off the stage, and it was empty, and Taddy had lost his hiding place. But anyway, I thought at first that I would grow it back immediately, and then I looked at myself and I said, this is the real me. Finally, this is what I really look like. And I loved myself like that.
I would never have the nerve to do that.
Well, you know, it comes from a different place. I mean, you don't have to do that. But I had to do that.
Were your parents very involved with your career? Did they object or did they encourage you?
They wanted me to be an artist.
Aren't you lucky? Isn't that wonderful?
I'm such a lucky person, Molly. I give thanks every day. I'm so grateful for my life and for the protection that I've had from beyond wherever. I'm a very lucky person. And so my parents wanted me to be an artist. They gave me painting lessons and sculpture lessons, and my father took me to the Louvre every Sunday. And then when I started to, you know, be very avant-garde, as they say, that was where they lost me, or I lost them. And I was not able to really be myself as an artist until their deaths. And first my father died, and I was able to do instant theater. And then my mother died, and I was able to do my own performances. But they needed to go before I could really, really find my voice.
In talking to you, I see that life has been a lot of meetings and partings. You said you had the same experience with Jasper Johns, that he came out to see a performance and didn't like it, and that was the end of it. But do you think you set those things up so you can keep alone and creating?
I just go with the flow very much. And I find that the flow is such that people come and go.
Yeah. And
also objects come and go. I've lost a lot of objects, and I've lost a lot of things. And you know, having been a war refugee when I was 13, and having to leave France, and the way in which I was going changed everything for me, because suddenly I realized everything is here and then gone.
That's the way we have to end it right now.
It's gone.
I just cannot thank you enough, Rachel. I know how busy you are, and I'm just so thrilled that you were able to make it and be here with me today. Art is not for everyone. It never has been. It never will be. But for those of you who love it like we do, we want to turn you on. I'm Molly Barnes. Thanks for watching.
We mammals know we're off and running. Opportunists, rugged individualists, grabbing our big chance, developing strategies, breaking treaties, tricking and tinkering and sticking together. We're family. Putting up a front in this new world, putting on the dog, the rat, the horse, the woolly mammoth, the saber-toothed tiger, to conquer, to